Hello, everyone. So welcome to our webinar that we are going to be debunking sleep issues and insomnia. Unfortunately, in this day and age, this is something that a lot of people are dealing with. And some of it's mild cases, and in other cases, it's very, very extreme. And a lot of these people are coming through our doors with very limited options that are being offered through conventional therapies. So it's really left up to us to dig a little bit deeper, ask better questions, and be able to guide them down a path that's really going to address the root cause. So that's some of the things that we're going to cover today, is just truly understanding the foundation of why sleep issues are happening to many, many people, maybe even us, and what are some of the things that we can do about it. So before we get into it, some of you might be wondering, who am I? But I'm Dr. Nicole Rivera. I run a integrative medicine facility out of New Jersey. It's called Integrative Wellness Group. We've been at it for about 10 years. There's been many leaps and bounds when it has come to the style of our practice, but we are really working with people that have been failed by conventional therapies, that feel lost. They feel like they are a mystery to medicine and are just looking for answers and looking for quality solutions, and that's what we are providing. I've also decided to share my knowledge through a platform called the Institute for Integrative Wellness, where I am teaching other practitioners how to encompass integrative medicine or an integrative mindset into their practice, but also help them scale to really love their business again. I know in the healthcare industry, we tend to have blurred boundaries, we tend to have blurred lines, and we often really struggle with the work-life balance, and it leaves us in a fragile place. So it's really about, educating yourself to have a broader knowledge base, which really starts with webinars like this, but also being able to scale your business so it's successful, but it's also not necessarily consuming your entire life. And if you're looking for more information and podcasts and webinars, I am the queen of content. So you could definitely head over and check out Integrative Wellness Radio on iTunes. And we also have Integrative Wellness TV on YouTube. So plenty of great resources. I have actually crammed a lot of quality information into about 30 minutes. I have done sleep webinars in the past that have actually been 90 minutes. So if you're super intrigued after this and are like, whoa, I want more, definitely head over to either one of those platforms to get access to additional information. But I want to kick this off with a case review, because I personally find that this is one of the best ways that we learn as practitioners, is hearing the real life stories. Because unfortunately, many of us have gone through school, and when we get out and we start our clinical practice, we often feel that not many of our patients match the textbook. And it's true, they really don't. And in the world that we're in right now, things are getting progressively more complex. There are more autoimmune conditions. There are more illnesses at younger and younger ages. And it's keeping a lot of physicians really stumped. So we need to understand that not everything matches the textbook, and it's about leveraging better testing and better questions to dig a bit deeper with our patients. So this specific patient presented with depression, anxiety, sleep issues, chronic constipation. But as we dig into this, this person had mild symptoms that were very intermittent, and usually had a reason for why they felt depressed, or a reason why they felt anxious, or a reason why their sleep wasn't good for a couple of days. So this is something that I personally find to be a very common theme, is that we normalize many of our symptoms. Our patients normalize many of their symptoms, and they usually have an excuse as to why it exists. So digging a bit more into the history, this person ended up having a snowboarding accident in college. And snowboarding accident resulted in a severe concussion, neck sprain, 13 staples in the head. This was not managed properly. It was pretty much said, hey, just get the staples out of your head and move on with your life. You'll be fine. You're young and resilient. There was some constipation issues that started shortly after, but it was very intermittent. Came and went. Usually it was like, oh, maybe I ate too much. Oh, I ate out. Maybe I ate, too much junk food, etc. There was also bouts of intermittent depression, but it was usually felt that it was situational, that, hey, there was a trigger, there was a situation that caused me to feel low. There also started to be some bouts of dizziness that were happening, getting up too fast, feeling a little lightheaded, dizzy, never to the capacity of vertigo, but feeling definitely just a bit off kilter. Then there started to be some more drastic symptoms. There were bouts of fainting that were very close to the onset of the menstrual cycle. After visiting the OBGYN, they were told that it must be a cyst that is becoming inflamed near the menstrual cycle, and then that is triggering the fainting. Really didn't get a quality answer or a solution at that time. After, these bouts of depression, we started to move into a little bit of anxiety, just worrying a lot, ruminating, telling the same story over and over. How could I have done that differently? How could I have handled that differently? And having some moments of scary memory loss, like walking into a room, hey, what did I walk in here for? So as we started to get into a little bit more of the consultation, but also getting into more of the history, also turns out that this person was a pescatarian for about 10 years. So pescatarian is when you only eat fish. The person at the time did not know that not all fish is created equal, that there is a difference between farmed fish versus wild fish, and there is a lot of toxicity associated with fish as well. So some of this exposure actually led to having a lot of parasitic infections in the gut. Yes, parasites are a real thing for those of you that are like, is that really that common? Parasites are unfortunately very common, especially in people that consume seafood. Parasites are common just by swimming in lakes, rivers, oceans. So for those of you that are not testing for it or not considering it, start considering it, because it is definitely a huge part of the puzzle. So I want to backtrack because this person that I am talking about is me. And I know the story very well, obviously because I lived and breathed it. But what I've learned from my own health history is that there are many other people that have had similar scenarios. So how this all pieces together is that there was a head injury that was the first disruption of my vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve innervates your respiratory rate, your heart rate, as well as your gastrointestinal mobility. It also plays a very significant role in your equilibrium. So it can contribute to dizziness. If it gets advanced, it can contribute to low blood pressure that then leads to what is now called POTS syndrome, which people sometimes cannot even be in a standing position without falling over. This is also something that can contribute to heart palpitations, which was something else that I was experiencing. It also can contribute to shortness of breath. So for myself, after the head injury, I didn't have tons of issues around the vagus nerve, but once I started to have gastrointestinal infections, this is what actually really started to compromise my vagus nerve, because your vagus nerve can become injured by a neck injury, head injury, because it starts in the brainstem, but it also can become infected based off of what is going on in your gastrointestinal system. So after I started to have a massive inflammatory response in the vagus nerve is when I started to have fainting spells. I started to have chronic constipation. I started to have blood sugar dysregulation, which all then started to create a lot of issues in how well my brain was functioning. And part of this was because when I had my head injury, and in addition to the scar tissue from the staples in my head, it actually completely compromised the blood flow in and out of my head, which then compromised the lymphatic drainage through the glial system of my brain. So what people don't understand is that the mechanisms around your brain that bring blood flow and oxygen to the brain, that also drain toxins away from the brain, is a very, very intricate and complex system. But unfortunately, it's very easily disrupted based off of infections, based off of gut issues, based off of head injuries, based off of neck injuries, based off of tight muscles in the neck surgeries. So the important thing to understand is that when I started to have these really bizarre sleep issues, is that they weren't your traditional issues. It's not that I had trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. I was actually passing out. I could literally get in the car because when we started our business 10 years ago, my husband and I shared a car. We were going to the same practice. So we figured, save money. Let's just have one car. So we would practice all day and then we'd get in the car, maybe 6:30. We had a 10-minute drive. I would pass out to the point that he had to shake me to get me out of the car because I was in such a deep sleep. And I classified myself as a great sleeper. I could fall asleep anywhere, anytime. I could sleep like a rock. Nothing could wake me up. So later down the line, when I got into this world of integrative functional medicine, I did neurotransmitter testing on myself. And I ended up having very, very, very elevated levels of melatonin. And I remember at the time not understanding it, thinking it was really bizarre. And I was like, what does this mean? So even years after that, I started to understand the role of melatonin in the body and in the brain. And obviously we all contribute melatonin to be something that helps us sleep. And many of your patients are probably taking melatonin to help with their sleep. But in the event that you are overproducing melatonin, very often you're overproducing it because it's trying to detox your brain, including your pineal gland. So because of all the mercury toxicity that I had from years of consuming fish, in addition to a variety of other toxins I was exposed to through my life, I was overproducing melatonin. And this was something that was actually causing me to almost have a low-grade narcolepsy. So the point of me telling you this story is that it's not always matching the textbook. And when we're talking about sleep issues, we're not necessarily just talking about the people that can't sleep. We're also talking about the people that sleep like a dead person and can't move and nothing wakes them up. That is equally as much of an issue as the person that can't sleep that has full-on insomnia. So we have to ask better questions and we have to look at both ends of the spectrum because it's not about being polarized on one end. It's about being balanced in the middle. So this is something that is just really important to understand because again, if your patient is taking melatonin or that is something that you're recommending, anything in excess or anything over a long period of time can have its own negative effects. And one of the questions to ask your patients that are taking melatonin is, are you having bad dreams? Are you having vivid dreams? Are you having headaches? Because that is a sign that the melatonin is actually detoxifying their brain, which could potentially even disrupt their sleep more so because it's not necessarily supporting the sleep. It's actually ramping up detoxification. So we have to start thinking outside of the box. Sleep disturbances are not just about a melatonin deficiency. This could be adrenal dysfunction. This could be liver dysfunction. This could be gut dysfunction. And we're going to dig more into these possibilities as we continue this webinar. The other thing too is depression and insomnia are very, very, very much connected. When we start to look at the biochemical pathways that control our serotonin, those are the same pathways that dictate our melatonin production. So if somebody has severe depression, they might be treated conventionally through antidepressants, but that can pose an issue in melatonin production as well. And we will talk more about that specific pathway. Sleep issues are also very much connected to insufficient brain detox. So when we're talking about what that looks like, it looks like the person that has migraines, the person that has headaches, the person that has bloodshot eyes and eye pressure, the person that has chronic sinusitis, that can't breathe, that maybe has sleep apnea. These are all signs that the brain is not detoxing. Someone that has giant tonsils or has had their tonsils removed because their tonsils were so overly infected and inflamed. Someone that has chronic neck pain, but then when you touch their neck or you ask about their neck, it actually is all due to lymphatic congestion, that their neck almost feels squishy and tender. These are all signs that the brain is not detoxing. Another lifestyle component is blue light. Everybody is using technology. We are now living in an era that everybody is on Zoom and doing telehealth or working from home. And we literally have so much overstimulation of blue light, and we are constantly being exposed to this mechanism that overstimulates the brain, ramps up our cortisol, ramps up our adrenaline, and affects our sleep patterns. And there are other aspects here that are more tied to the gut and detox pathways that a lot of practitioners are not even thinking about when a patient is presenting with sleep disturbances. They're not always asking about blood sugar. They're not always asking about blood flow and circulation. And they're not always asking about their lifestyle. You know, when is the last time that you read a book? When is the last time that you exercised? When is the last time that you did something to stimulate your brain and neurological system? So, unstable blood sugar. I am specifically saying unstable blood sugar because this is not about diabetes, and this is not just about high blood sugar. This is also your patients that are dealing with low blood sugar. And listen, not everybody knows they have low blood sugar. So we need to know how to ask better questions. So the patient that wakes up in the morning, they're not hungry. If anything, maybe they have an aversion to food. Maybe they're even a little nauseous, but they start their day with coffee. So then the coffee suppresses their appetite. They're usually not going to be hungry. Maybe it's 11, maybe it's 12, maybe it's even 2 in the afternoon. They finally eat because they're like, oh my God, I'm starving. Intuitively, their body craves carbs. So they're probably grabbing a sandwich. Maybe they're grabbing something quote unquote healthy, which is going to be sushi or a rice bowl. Or even a giant, what are those things called? Those acai bowls that are the smoothie bowls, but in reality, they're tons of sugar. So naturally, they're going to gravitate towards something that is going to spike the blood sugar because they're so bottomed out at this point. So then they eat, then they crash. They're looking for a midday pick-me-up. Maybe it's coffee, maybe it's a mocha latte, maybe it's a vending machine chocolate bar. Then they get to the evening time. Oh my gosh, I'm starving again. I'm going to snack on rice. I'm going to snack on cheese and crackers, and then I'm going to make dinner. And then after dinner, they're grabbing for the ice cream or something sweet. Tell that story to any one of your patients, and their jaw will be dropped and be like, oh my gosh, you just told me my biography. And this used to be me, so I know it very well. And your patients think they're doing something good because they think, well, I'm not consuming a lot of calories because, you know, I'm skipping breakfast. Other people are now thinking, oh, this is good because intermittent fasting is good for you. So now if I don't eat till 2, I'm actually doing something positive for my body. But what they're really doing is they're putting their blood sugar on a roller coaster ride. They're bottoming out, they're eating, they're spiking, they're crashing. And this is a pattern that perpetuates massive issues in pancreatic function, which then later down the line can lead to diabetes. So we need to start considering how many of our patients are in a low blood sugar crisis. The other thing too is that some people have pancreatic stress because of these lifestyle patterns, because they're eating or not eating in that pattern we just described. Then there's other people that have chronic reflux, indigestion, heartburn, or they've actually been diagnosed what's called SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, And all of this disruption in the stomach and small intestine is actually disrupting the pancreas because the pancreas is connected to the small intestine. So there's always a possibility that the blood sugar is on a roller coaster ride because there is infections, inflammation, heavy metals that are living in the stomach and small intestine. So the primary reason why this is important for sleep is because of two things. Number one is the roller coaster of blood sugar completely compromises cortisol levels as well as adrenal function. So now we have a problem from a hormonal perspective that is going to contribute to sleep issues. Then on the flip side is that your brain runs on glucose, but it runs on stable glucose. Your brain doesn't know what to do. It's not really just your brain. It's your entire body does not know what to do when blood sugar is constantly crashing and spiking. So if you have this spike and crash with your blood sugar, you're going to have a lot of different organs in your body that are going to be stressed, but your body is going to be moving into this fight or flight. As soon as it moves into fight or flight, no longer can your brain adequately use the glucose. So now your brain is not getting proper fuel, which means your pineal gland is not going to function optimally, which is then going to compromise your melatonin. So we have a massive trickle-down effect that happens strictly just by having abnormal blood sugar. Then we have this blood flow conversation. The reason why blood flow is so significant for optimal sleep and optimal brain function is because blood brings oxygen to your tissues. So if your brain is not getting proper oxygen, then it is not going to necessarily be able to regulate different neurological pathways, and it is definitely not going to be able to adequately produce and use melatonin. So we need to ask questions about blood pressure. There are some people that know they have a blood pressure problem, and there are other people that have no idea. So you have to ask questions in a specific way to get better information. Do you feel lightheaded or dizzy upon standing? Do you have cold hands and feet? Do you have what's called Raynaud's phenomenon, which is when people have really terrible circulation to their hands and feet? Do you have bouts of getting really hot and really flush? Many women are going to blame this on menopause, or hormonal changes, but really sometimes it's a blood pressure dysregulation, or their blood pressure is revving up. In addition, is if you do not have proper blood flow to the brain, you might be dealing with headaches or migraines. This is the people that describe, I feel like my head is in a vice. I feel like I have so much pressure behind my eyes. The next question you ask them is, does caffeine make your headaches better? Or does Excedrin migraine, which contains caffeine, does that make your headaches better? And if they answer yes, then you know that their headaches or migraines are actually triggered by improper blood flow to the brain. They might also be dealing with intermittent visual issues, or they might have been told that they have glaucoma or intraocular pressure. And again, this dysregulation of blood pressure, especially low blood pressure, could very much cause dizziness or even vertigo. I know vertigo has many different origins, but it can be triggered by low blood pressure. So again, if your brain is not getting proper blood flow, it is not getting proper oxygen, which then means that you're not having proper detox of the brain, but you are also not going to be able to have proper regulation of neurological pathways that are supporting melatonin. And not only is blood flow into the brain important, but blood flow out of the brain via the venous system. So some of the specific things that you know, that you can ask to know if someone is dealing with drainage issues. And if you are a chiropractor or a physical therapist or someone that's putting your hands on the patient, don't take their word for it. Touch the neck, feel the glands, feel the glands underneath the jawline, feel the glands on the SCM, and check to see, do you feel swollen lymph nodes? Do you feel a squishiness in the neck? Does the patient report like, ow, that's really tender? And it's deciphering, is this more lymphatic issues, or is this obviously more of a muscular issue? The interesting thing is, even if it is muscular, the different muscles of the neck, like the scalenes and the SCM, if they're extremely tight, they're also going to impede drainage because they can impede the jugular vein. So regardless if it's truly musculoskeletal or if there is lymphatic issues, gland issues, those are all posing massive issues for how well the brain is detoxing and how well the brain is draining. Again, people can report migraines and headaches, but these people might not be saying, they might be like, no, actually caffeine doesn't make my headaches better because my headaches they're in my forehead, it's in my cheeks, it's my sinuses. And some people have chronic sinus infections, and then some people are just like, no, my sinuses are fine, but you're listening to them and you could tell that they can't breathe. You can tell that they're stuffy. You can tell that they have phlegm built up in their throat. So again, most of the things that your patients are dealing with, they've been going on so long that they are normal to your patient. So you have to look, you have to listen, and you have to be able to visually assess your patient. But some of your patients are waking up with brain fog that goes away after about an hour. Some of them are waking up with a low-grade headache in the forehead that goes away after an hour. Or they feel like they have stuffy ears that usually, again, can go away after being in an upright position. These are all signs that there are major, major drainage issues. So if your patient is dealing with any of these three categories or all three, then we know that there is potentially other layers that are contributing to their sleep disturbances. And it really comes back to maybe not having proper oxygenation of the brain, maybe not having proper drainage of the brain, and not having proper glucose fuel to the brain as well. Stimulation. This is another key factor. And unfortunately, in this day and age, most of us go to school, we go to college maybe we go and seek out, learning beyond our undergraduate. But after we get into the workforce, most of us stop learning. We stop reading, we don't attend courses anymore. We just get into the day-to-day. We get busy with our jobs, we get busy with raising kids, we get busy with life. And what happens is that we are not stimulating our brain anymore. And we start to have different lobes of the brain that become suppressed. And this then poses issues in different areas that patients get very frustrated with. So the pathways of driving their car and doing their job and cooking and cleaning and taking care of the house, those pathways are really strong because they do it day in and day out. But then the pathways for exercise or the pathways for strength, the pathways for doing anything outside of the normal routine become dampened, and it makes it very difficult for people to get out of their comfort zone. And one of the examples of this is that the people that are in that routine, the day-to-day, in the grind, and then, they're like, we're going to go on vacation. The family's going on vacation. So they get in the car and they're taking an 8-hour trip to wherever. And the person that's driving gets to the destination and they get out of the car and they're like, oh my gosh, I need a nap. I am so tired. Like, I am so physically tired. Which doesn't make a ton of sense because they sat in a car. They didn't do any type of physical activity. But they have physical fatigue due to the massive mental fatigue. So this is because they were tapping into a part of their brain that is so underutilized that it actually fatigued the entire body, including the muscles. And that all goes back to overstimulating parts of the nervous system that are normally understimulated. So this is something that's also very important in evaluating why your patient might be having sleep issues, is that are they revving up their brain by constantly watching TV, reading, but reading on a Kindle or an iPad, and they're not necessarily exercising. They're not reading a physical book. They are not doing anything outside of their normal routine. So this is a very, very important thing to ask, because sometimes it is a very simple fix of just helping them to do little things on a day-to-day that can start stimulating other parts of the brain to create balance from the left to right hemisphere. And of course, when it comes to toxicity, and I'm talking heavy metals, I'm talking toxicity from chemicals, toxicity from personal products, toxicity from plastics, toxicity from air pollution. There are many toxins that are affecting all of us day to day, and toxicity can play a very specific role in the brain that causes difficulty in how the left and right hemispheres communicate with each other. And when the left and right hemispheres have trouble communicating with each other, we are going to see alterations in these neurological pathways that produce our melatonin, our serotonin, our dopamine, our GABA. So it's very, very important to look at all of these different layers, and I'll be giving you some resources on how you can leverage testing outside of just asking better questions through your consultation. So we've touched on some of these things so far, but some of the biggest triggers for sleep issues, including insomnia, really has to do with not having darkness. So when you are talking to your patient, you have to ask them, do you have night lights in your bedroom? Do you have lights that are coming in through the window? Do you have many digital clocks? Do you have cordless landline phones on your bedstand? By the way, cordless landline phones put off the most amount of electromagnetic frequencies, more than a cell phone, more than a router. That's a problem in itself. Outside of the light it might be putting off because of the screen on the cordless phone. But is the person watching TV before bed? Are they looking at an iPad? Are they looking at a Kindle? All of these things are extremely important. This is not about taking all of this away from your patient, because some patients might get very upset if you're saying you can't watch TV before bed because they've been doing it for years upon years. But there are tools that they can use. They can download different things onto their devices that block the blue light. But there are also blue light blocking glasses that stimulate melatonin. The specific company that I'm aware of is called Blue Box. It's BLUBOX.com, and they make an amber colored glasses that actually block the blue light and allow that if people are wearing them at night watching TV or watching anything on their iPad, that it will not rev up pathways in the brain that will keep them awake. So that's a fantastic, easy tool to implement with your patients. But the other thing too that a lot of people are not understanding is that serotonin makes melatonin. So a lot of your patients are on antidepressants, or they are on even natural things to boost their serotonin. And especially when we're using prescriptions in the form of SSRIs, is many people are not necessarily taking the proper methyl donors or cofactors that are necessary to allow the receptors in the brain and the gut to use serotonin. So the most important thing is considering, does your patient have adequate zinc? Do they have adequate B6? Do they have adequate magnesium? All of those things are very important to make sure that they are utilizing the serotonin, but also having the proper cofactors so the serotonin can make melatonin. So these are all key things to keep in mind when you are looking at the big picture of how to best help your patient. But if your patient is also dealing with a serotonin deficiency and they are struggling with depression and they are struggling with sleep issues, do they have gut issues? Do they have gut infections? Do they have parasitic infections? Do they have bacterial overgrowth? Do they have candida? Do they have other types of fungal invasion? Do they have massive pesticide residues in their gut? One of the ways that you can actually determine pesticide residues is if you do a stool sample with a patient and they have extremely elevated E. coli and extremely elevated salmonella levels, that is not necessarily because of eating too much chicken or eating too much spinach, but this can actually be due to glyphosate toxicity, which is from the primary pesticide called Roundup. So there are tests that you can do in order to decipher, is that part of their puzzle? One of them is Great Plains Labs. They do a test called Total Tox. I think it's called that. Yeah. Or GP Tox. And then there's Total Tox by Vibrant America. So those are two tests that actually give you an idea if pesticides are part of the gut problem. So we talked a lot about blood sugar. And when we're talking about blood sugar, we're talking about insulin resistance that is going to happen when the blood sugar is constantly spike, crash, spike, crash. So if we have insulin resistance, we have a lot of issues with how well our cells can use glucose. So if your cells do not use glucose, then you're just going to have a bunch of glucose floating around, causing inflammation, disrupting your organs and tissues, and actually stressing the kidneys out. So the more you stress out the kidneys, the more the adrenals become stressed out. And now we start to have massive cortisol issues. So this is very, very important, is that if you do run testing for cortisol or you do run testing for neurotransmitters, is being able to know that if cortisol is really disrupted and cortisol is spiking in the evening, then this could definitely be associated with blood sugar issues. It could also be associated with overstimulation from the blue light at evening hours as well. So we really need to make sure that the adrenals are functioning optimally, and caffeine, nicotine, other types of stimulants, this includes like ADD medication, these things can be very disruptive to the adrenal function and can be very disruptive to sleep. And I know that some of you that are listening are probably like, I am not an MD. I'm not versed in pharmacology. I'm not versed in medications. Become familiar. All of your patients are on them. And you need to be able to decipher, when do they have a problem that you can help them with? When do they have a problem that is actually a side effect of a medication? And it's really just collaborating with these other practitioners to really come to a decision on what is best for the patient. Because a lot of times I found myself trying to put out fires for different imbalances that I found in the testing, but it was actually just things that were being either overstimulated or understimulated based off of some of the medications. So definitely become familiar with these things and collaborate with other practitioners, because that's how we're going to best help our clients at this point in time. Healthy pineal function is very, very important because melatonin is very dictated by the health of the pineal gland. And, there's a lot of speculation on some of the things that affect the pineal gland. And there's been a lot of studies that have come out really saying that the pineal gland is very affected by certain toxins, one of them being fluoride. There are many, many other toxins that can negatively impact the pineal gland. But the most important thing that I want you to take away is that the pineal gland can only become compromised if you do not have proper drainage issues. So if you do not have proper drainage because the lymphatic system is not working, because the person has a lot of swollen glands, they have a lot of musculoskeletal issues in the neck, then this is going to really be a culprit for why they might be having sleep issues that are tied to pineal gland dysfunction. So I can't tell you how important it is to make sure that we are addressing the blood sugar, we are addressing any gut issues, we are addressing blood flow in as well as drainage out. So if you haven't realized this yet, I'm here to tell you that you do not know what you do not know, but more importantly, your patients don't know what they don't know. They don't know that their low-grade congestion is not normal. They don't know that the fact that they had their tonsils removed because they were always infected at 10 years old, that could play a role in their sleep issues. They don't know that not eating breakfast in the morning is putting their body in a blood sugar crisis. They don't know these things. And it's important for us to educate them, to help them understand that all of these things are significant, but when addressed, these are the things that will actually help them to fix the root cause. And that is the most empowering to our patients, because most of them are used to being told, just take this pill. We don't know what the root cause is. This happens. It's probably genetic. And it's not. And that's really myth number one, is that mental health issues, from depression and anxiety to sleep issues, are not genetic. Yes, there are genetic predispositions, but those genetic predispositions have to come to fruition based off of other factors, based off of other stressors. And I know that we've driven a lot of these points home already, but even someone who's like, I have seasonal affective disorder. I'm not depressed. I just get sad when it's dark out. Well, seasonal affective disorder is a massive serotonin and tryptophan issue. And again, we've established that serotonin is the precursor to melatonin. So if your patient is dealing with seasonal affective disorder as well as sleep issues, then we have to really see where does the problem start? Is it truly melatonin, or is it actually serotonin, or is it tryptophan? And there are ways of leveraging better testing to figure this out. Something that we haven't touched on so far too is that when we talk about this idea of blood flow in and out of the brain, some of the studies that have been done specifically by Fry Labs, FRY, they have actually done some amazing case studies over the course of about 10 years. And what they were doing is they were doing specific testing on patients that were suffering with multiple sclerosis as well as ALS. And what they specifically found is that the patients, the common denominator with multiple sclerosis was fungal invasion of the blood vessels. And we're talking fungal invasion maybe from mold, maybe from candida, maybe from other types of yeast. So this is very real. This is not uncommon. Most of us have been exposed to massive amounts of fungus over time. There is fungus and mold in coffee, in blue cheese, in peanut butter, in rice, in other types of grains. Every single antibiotic on the market is made from fungus. Penicillin is made from penicillium, which is a mold. So if you have had high doses of antibiotics or frequent antibiotics, or you are a vegetarian that is actually a carbitarian and all you eat is rice, and you have also been, a coffee drinker, and you drink coffee from, typical places like Dunkin' Donuts, etc., you might actually be exposing yourself to fungus unknowingly. Maybe you've lived in a water damaged building. Maybe in college you lived in a funky smelling basement. These are all contributing factors to fungus invading not only the blood vessels, but the detox pathways of the body that can actually compromise how well you're getting blood flow into the brain as well as blood flow out of the brain. And that is actually what CCSVI stands for. It is chronic cerebral spinal fluid venous insufficiency. So this is when the glial system, which is the lymphatic system of the brain, and the venous system are not draining properly, and very much CCSVI is most oftenly correlated with fungal invasion. So this is very, very important to consider in your patients when you're doing their testing. There are amazing tests out there for mycotoxins and mold toxicity through companies like Vibrant America. And the endocannabinoid system, we're going to talk a little bit more about this and different herbs and supplements that are supportive to it. But this is becoming a bit more of a common theme, or I would say a common conversation in clinical practice, because a lot of people are utilizing CBD. They're using it for pain, they're using it for anxiety, they're using it for sleep. But there's a little bit more of the intricacies of the endocannabinoid system that practitioners should understand. I'm not going to go super in depth because it is a very complex system, but there is different receptors in the endocannabinoid system, some that will regulate neurological function, and then there are others that are actually more tied to immune function. So it's better for you to understand which products help what, so that you're not necessarily recommending the wrong types of products for improving sleep issues. So myth number 2 that maybe you understand as a practitioner, but your patients do not, is that they think that they've had the best testing. They think that blood work is the gold standard. They don't even know that you can get tested for melatonin. They don't know that you can test serotonin. They don't know that that testing exists. They definitely don't know that you should be tested for heavy metals and chemical toxicities. People are completely unaware. We have all been programmed that blood work is the gold standard. MRIs and CAT scans are the secondary option, but they are not necessarily knowing that there are other more advanced tests out there that can really get to the bottom of why they have sleep issues. So neurotransmitter testing is something that can be used to really evaluate melatonin and serotonin levels. Not only that, it can look at GABA. GABA is the one inhibitory neurotransmitter that calms the excitatory pathways of the brain. So sometimes sleep disturbances are just because someone does not have adequate amounts of GABA. If you are running blood work regularly, you can actually run something through LabCorp or Quest, which would then be in network with their insurance, but you can run something called anti-GAD, G-A-D. And this actually tells you if there is an autoimmune attack on the glutamate and GABA receptors. So this is very, very helpful to understand that, maybe there's an autoimmune condition that's actually affecting their GABA, which is why they're maybe struggling with sleep issues or even ADD or anxiety. There's also something called a qEEG. A lot of patients have heard of an EEG. The easy way I explain it to patients is that an EEG, slaps electrodes on, looks at the brain function, but it's kind of like negative or positive. It's normal function or not normal function. A quantitative EEG actually maps the brain. It looks at the lobes of the brain. It looks at the brain waves. It actually gives you more intricate details of what is firing, what is overfiring, what is underfiring, how is the left and the right communicating with each other. And this is something that gives people a lot of insight. Did your head injury actually affect your neurological system? Did it affect and cause some of your sleep issues? If you suspect gut issues, there are so many different types of testing out there for the gut. Stool samples are personally not my favorite. They do give us some good information, but they have something called a gut zoomer through Vibrant America, which I personally find to be the best on the market right now. And heavy metal testing, chemical toxicity testing. Like I mentioned, Great Plains has some great tests. Vibrant America has some great tests for this. In addition, Neural Zoomer, this is one of its kind. This is a test through Vibrant America that's actually looking at the blood-brain barrier. It's looking at autoimmune attacks on the brain. It's looking at viral infections affecting the brain. This can very much give you insight into complex neurological cases, including people that have such severe insomnia that they don't sleep for days upon days. And again, making sure that you are looking at the possibility for fungus and mycotoxins if someone is complaining of the migraines, complaining of headaches, complaining of pressure behind the eye, complaining of constant sinus pressure. This might be a sign that fungus is not allowing proper blood flow in and out of the head. So myth number 3, conventional methods are the only solutions. So the thing that I like to explain to patients is that When we are trying to manipulate hormones, melatonin is included in this conversation, that we have a negative feedback loop that will happen. So many of your patients have started some type of medication or herbal regimen, or they started melatonin and they're like, wow, I had improvement, but then I plateaued, or then I went backwards, or then I needed to up my dose. And what you need to understand is that you're not fixing the problem, you're just palliating the problem. So, okay, melatonin's low. So let's add more melatonin to the body through something pharmaceutical or natural. That's not the point. The point is why? Why is the melatonin low? Why is the serotonin low? Why is the dopamine low? Why is the GABA low? There is always going to be a root cause, and it's not about just manipulating those pathways, because eventually the body and the brain catches up. If you're putting excess melatonin in, first, your patient might have a really bad reaction. They might have really bad dreams, night terrors, or it might actually keep them awake even more so. And that's because the melatonin is detoxing their brain. That's number one. Number two is that you might actually be causing a different problem down the line, because if you're putting something in, the body recognizes it and it's kind of like, whoa, where'd that come from? I didn't make that. Well, I better not make it, because if I make it and then we also have this excess, then this person is going to go into an overload. So this is very, very common with serotonin. I've had many patients that have come to me that are like, I had a really bad reaction to something that was given to me for serotonin support for depression, and I test and they're in serotonin syndrome, which is a very, very dangerous condition. So we have to be very careful on trying to manipulate pathways and without looking at the root cause. Don't get me wrong, if your patient doesn't sleep and melatonin is going to help them in the short term, great. But while you're trying to help them in the short term, still be looking at the big picture to figure out the root cause so that you can fix the foundational problem. So myth number 4, herbs are not effective for sleep issues. This always makes me laugh, because how pharmacology was created was based on herbs and plants. So they just took herbs and plants and manipulated them differently in a lab in order to create, different pharmaceuticals. But besides the point. But some of the things that are really, really important to understand is that it's not about like, hey, here's your master protocol for sleep issues. You have to consider, what is the problem? What is the problem for your patient? What is the root cause for your patient? Is it the adrenals? Is it the gut? Is it the blood sugar? Is it circulation? Is it the cannabinoid system? Is it all of it? And if it is all of it, I don't want that to be overwhelming, but you need to start somewhere. I start with clear the bad stuff out, get the crap out of the body. If the person has heavy metals in their gut and, parasitic infections, get that out. Then reevaluate. Maybe the blood sugar improves. Maybe the adrenals improve. Maybe the circulation improves because there's less inflammation. So we definitely have to look at what is the foundational problem and then work our way up from there. But if you do have a patient that you feel it's really truly coming from their adrenal glands, maybe they, worked in Manhattan, they burnt the candle at both ends, they commuted 3 hours a day back and forth, they were working 15-hour days, they're an entrepreneur working 90-hour weeks, maybe that's their story. And you're like, I'm confident that, their adrenals are a huge part of this puzzle. Then these are some of the amazing herbs that are really, really effective. And these are classified as adaptogenic. So what I want you to understand about this is that these herbs are amazing because if the adrenal is burnt to a crisp, it is completely under functioning, the adaptogenic herbs are going to help bring it back into balance. If the adrenal is revved up and it is pumping out adrenaline, pumping out cortisol, then it's going to be in an over-functioning or hyper-functioning. Then the adaptogenic herbs are going to bring it down and bring it back into balance. So these are very safe to use with your patients because you you have to, of course, dose it properly, but you minimize risk when it comes to overstimulating or understimulating. So this is definitely some of the herbs that I find to be very, very beneficial. And there are companies out there that are actually blending some of these together to give you even more benefit when you're working with your patients. If you do find that the gut is part of the problem, then you want to consider how can we start clearing some of these infections out of the gut. So these are some of the amazing, supplements, herbs, as well as remedies that can be very, very beneficial. So garlic, oregano oil, Spanish black radish, I find these to be extremely antimicrobial. They're very, very beneficial with getting microbes out. They also are versatile in the sense that they can target fungus. They can help to target parasites. They also target bacteria. So you're getting a multidisciplinary action from these different ingredients. Artemisinin has been shown to be extremely effective for parasitic infections. St. John's wort is extremely effective, as well as thuja for viruses. Yes, people can have viruses in their gut. In addition, beets are very, very beneficial for producing bile. This is great for people that have constipation, helps them to pump out more bile from the liver gallbladder so that they can start to have more motility with their bowel movements. And if you do have the person that has the gut issues, but also the blood sugar issues, you might want to consider these enzyme complexes or bitters or even bitter melon. These are really, really fantastic at helping the stomach, pancreas, and small intestine produce enzymes so that they're breaking down their food properly and they are actually breaking down carbohydrates properly, which is minimizing the blood sugar spikes. Andrographis is something that is also very, very beneficial when it comes to immune function. So andrographis is fantastic for viruses, but I do find that it is very helpful at almost activating the immune complexes of the gut as you are using some of these antimicrobial agents. So it's almost like you have the antimicrobials that are starting to eradicate these infections, but then you have the andrographis that is upregulating the immune system to clear out the issues via the bowels. So they're actually having these things leave the body through the bowel movement. So outside of the enzyme complexes, it's also, there are other herbs out there that are really helpful when it comes to improving blood sugar. So one of them specifically is called Gymnema. Gymnema is very, very beneficial in helping to improve blood sugar. And Gymnema works really well when you coincide it with certain minerals. So magnesium, iodine, and chromium. Chromium is very, very, very important in regulating blood sugar. Iodine is as well, but I want people to be aware of iodine's effect on the thyroid. So if you do have a patient who is struggling with thyroid issues, when you amp up iodine, it can actually make Hashimoto's markers, they're classified as thyroid antibodies, can sometimes make those antibodies look worse. And the reason being is iodine is a very big detoxifier of the thyroid. So again, if somebody has a lot of lymph congestion in their neck or they have very swollen tonsils and glands, chances are the same toxins or infections that are affecting those glands are also affecting the thyroid. So if you start ramping up someone's iodine to help their blood sugar, then you might see issues with their thyroid. So it's something just to be aware of, and you have to make sure you're monitoring it and giving the patient tools to monitor any negative thyroid response. So that could be heart palpitations, racy heart, or shakiness. So definitely make sure that you're keeping that in mind as you would be using any of these products. Improving circulation. So there's so many ways that you can go about this. One thing that I actually forgot to add here is that if a patient has had a history of stroke or blood clots, or was on birth control for an extended amount of time, which can cause blood clots, by the way. Then garlic. Garlic is one of the best things to help to resolve clots, plaques, and debris within the circulatory system. Unfortunately, people will smell like garlic as they're taking it, especially if they're taking it at a high dose. So, you kind of have to weigh it out and warn the patient that that is a possibility, that they will have garlic excreting out of their pores. So sometimes we will be using that more short term, so the patient is not completely appalling their coworkers as well as their spouse. But some of the other things that are really beneficial when it comes to improving circulation and blood flow is coleus root, hawthorn, ginkgo leaf, butcher's broom, as well as horse chestnut. And again, there are companies out there that are blending some of these products together, and then there are other companies that are doing, single dilutions of these herbs. So it's really just weighing out what is best for your patient and understanding the degree of their circulatory issues. There are other things that are also very beneficial when it comes to lymphatic drainage, but also improving the glial cell of the brain. So there are certain types of magnesium out there that are very, very beneficial when it comes to improving magnesium getting into the neurological system and crossing the blood-brain barrier. And there are also turmeric out there in specific blends that are doing the same. So turmeric that actually can improve glial cell function by decreasing neurological inflammation. So these are definitely products to consider when you're trying to improve that blood flow into the brain, as well as venous and glial drainage out of the brain. If you have a patient that can't lose weight, they constantly have swollen glands, they have bumps in their bikini line because of swollen glands, if they have fibrocystic breasts, if they never sweat, these are signs of major lymphatic congestion. Echinacea is a very gentle way to improve lymphatic drainage. Poke root is a bit more of an aggressive herb that will speed up lymphatic drainage more so than the echinacea. I tend to use poke root in very short doses, or I should say very short durations of time. Echinacea is something that has a lot of benefit for the lymphatic system, but a lot of benefit for the immune system as well. So I do find myself gravitating towards that herb in particular. But one thing I will say is if your patient has very significant lymphatic issues, don't just rely on herbs. Make sure that you're getting them to sweat. Maybe they're going in an infrared sauna. Maybe they're just exercising and breaking a sweat. Maybe they're doing craniosacral therapy that can improve the glial cell function of the brain. These are other therapies that are very, very complementary to taking an herbal regimen. So when it comes to the endocannabinoid system, just a few points that I want to make is that there is a lot of different CBD on the market. It is not all created equal, but there is definitely some hemp oils on the market that I really like. One of the hemp oils contains broccoli sprouts. And the reason I like this product is because it is really activating what is classified as the CB2 receptors. So just to be clear, in the endocannabinoid system, there are CB1 receptors and CB2. CB1, think of that as like someone who is maybe consuming a combination of CBD and THC, and then that is giving them a neurological response. But there is now the CB2 receptors, which is actually more of an immune regulator. So when we are talking about CBD, we want to be looking at, what is this product targeting? Is it targeting the CB1 receptors and maybe it's being marketed for anxiety? Is this targeting the CB2 receptors? And is this more so targeting immune function? So we all know that if the immune system is not healthy, we are going to be in fight or flight, which is then going to contribute to hormonal imbalances and melatonin issues and sleep issues. So when we're talking about hemp oil, when you're dealing with a hemp oil that is in combination with broccoli sprouts or something called sulforaphane, then this is like the ultimate combination that's really going to be helping with the CB2 receptors. So this is going to be regulating the immune system of the gut, and also really helping to decrease immune stress, which can then actually take the body out of that fight or flight, control the cortisol levels, control the adrenaline levels, and allow for GABA, melatonin, serotonin to be produced properly again. So this is not black and white. This is not, oh, hemp oil helps people sleep. This is working in a very different capacity and sometimes needs to be complemented with other herbs or even other remedies. So other sleep aids, these are things that are, maybe your patient is going through a really stressful time. Maybe they lost their job, maybe, they're getting a divorce, and they're just like, I am not sleeping, my stress is through the roof, I don't know what to do. And you're really just looking for like, okay, what can I give them that's going to help really just calm the nervous system and get them better sleep as they navigate this situation. So some of the things out there, valerian root is a fantastic option, very, very gentle, same as chamomile. This is why a lot of people drink chamomile tea at night. One of my favorites is kava, because kava not only is going to help with sleep, but it really, really calms feelings of anxiety. I find that a lot of my patients going through hardships do really, really well with kava. And I really like California poppy for the same reason, but you always have to be very careful with medications that people are on with recommending California poppy. California poppy is amazing. It's very powerful, but it should not be taken with any type of sedatives. It should not be taken with Klonopin. It should not be taken with Ativan. It should not be taken with Ambien. It really shouldn't be taken with anything that is depressing the central nervous system. So that's something key to keep in mind is, again, always making sure you're looking at the medications your patients are on. St. John's wort, again, love St. John's wort. It is an amazing antiviral. It is amazing for anxiety. It is amazing for depression. It is amazing for sleep. But because it is so powerful at supporting the serotonin melatonin pathway, you have to be very careful with someone taking this that is also either taking or has taken an antidepressant, because if you definitely don't want to be recommending this to a patient that is currently on an antidepressant. But I even find that you have to ask a patient, have you been on antidepressants? When? How long were you on it? Because it can push someone into what's called serotonin syndrome, which means they have way too much serotonin that is circulating in their system. So again, be very cautious with St. John's wort in anyone who is currently or has been on any type of SSRI. And skullcap. Skullcap is amazing. Again, going back to these herbs are so versatile. Skullcap is actually an amazing antiviral. It is also amazing at supporting the serotonin melatonin pathway. So again, you're not getting just one benefit from the use of some of these herbs. You're usually getting benefit in a couple of different areas of the body. So I hope these were really helpful tools. And again, don't put a Band-Aid, even if you're doing it in a natural way. Make sure you're digging deeper, you're asking better questions, you're leveraging better testing, because it is so, so important. And very, very rarely do your patient's symptoms look like the textbook. We need to do better testing. We need to customize our approach for the patient. We need to stop thinking that everyone wants to or is going to fall in this cookie cutter protocol. That is something that I teach regularly in the Institute to practitioners, is they're asking me, what is the patented SIBO protocol? What is the parasite protocol? Like, that's not how it works. You have to take many different data points into consideration in order to know what is going to make sense for your patient. So start thinking outside the box and start really leveraging better questions with your consultations, because that's where it starts. And I know some of you are not even doing consultations. You're maybe doing, a chiropractic evaluation, and you're asking a few questions about nutrition. My consultation is a full hour, and that allows me to get as much information as possible. And I charge for it, and I charge a good amount for it. And patients are so over the moon to be heard, to be asked questions that no one has asked them before, and they're willing to pay for it. So definitely keep that in consideration, because as practitioners that are here, that are educating ourselves, we need to be out with the old and in with the new. We need to really start segregating ourselves away from conventional, which is sick care, never finding the root cause, putting a Band-Aid on symptoms. I personally even find that functional medicine has its limitations. People are using this term functional medicine, and I technically was practicing as a functional medicine practitioner, and I was leveraging better testing and I was doing better consultations, but I found that my tools were limited. It was always diet supplements, diet supplements. Some of your patients that are coming to you are like, I've already been there, done that. What else do you have for me? And we need to start thinking integratively. Have a conversation about EMS, have a conversation about blue light, have a conversation about imbalances in their lifestyle, have a conversation about, do you exercise? Do you do any type of lymphatic drainage? Do you learn something new? Like, when's the last time that you've gotten out of your comfort zone? We need to start expanding our offerings, because not only are people getting stuck in conventional methods, but they're even getting stuck in this functional methodology. So it's starting to really branch out and offer more to people so that they can get the help that they deserve. And we could get excited as practitioners about the work that we do. Because sometimes we lose that excitement because we feel like we're doing the same thing. We feel like we're operating out of limited tools. We're getting stuck. We have patients that we help. We have other patients that we don't help. And, we lose that steam. And it's just about reigniting that fire with new methodologies, new ways of thinking, new testing, new protocols, and just getting excited again. So I hope that all of you really enjoyed this, and I hope it was super, super helpful. Like I said, head over to Integrative Wellness Radio if you're looking for more topics on all things functional and integrative medicine. And I hope you are able to apply this in your practice right away and start seeing amazing results with your patients.